Hey Jimmy, good to be here again.
We're back in the chat mode again.
Absolutely, yeah, chat mode. Yeah, so
Humans chatting.
That makes us bots or something. I want to kick off with something that we've talked about probably endlessly as far as other people are concerned, but we've talked about and written about at good length already, which is agents, this agentic phrase that people keep hearing, and just something I read yesterday or a couple of days ago was like that, everybody predicted 2025 year of the agent. And I read this quote said, yeah, it's the year of agent, but it hasn't been as practical as people expected. So it's still kind of theoretical, agents will be able to do X, Y, and Z. Now, counterbalancing that, just in the last week or two, yesterday Google came out with their first, a shopping-based agent, pick and pay. The agent does the work. Visa and MasterCard have said they're going to, are actively enabling agents to handle payments using tokenized payments. And all of those initiatives involve the biggest names in AI, the biggest names in technology. I think the Visa and MasterCard initiatives, it's literally the roll call of some of the biggest technology companies in the world. So this is real, it's happening. And I just want to I want you to ground us in what's hype and what's reality. Because I think sometimes we can maybe get lost in these four walls in CalypsoAI that, we're a step ahead maybe, or we're seeing things that the public aren't seeing. So ground us in reality. Agents as a real practical working thing. Where are we?
I guess why this is even a question is that with every new technology, there are the folks that are the early adopters and they tattoo the technology on their head day one. They're super adoption friendly. And they're out there banging the drum saying it's going to do everything, right? Then we have the opposite side, which are the folks that are absolute naysayers. It's going to be the end of humanity. It's going to destroy everything that we've created as a race. However, as with all things, the truth is somewhere in the middle. I would say it's closer to the optimists than the pessimists.
And that's interesting because I think the naysayers, for want of a better word, have probably dominated the conversation in the early part of this year anyway. It's, yeah, but jobs. Yeah, but, and we'll talk about security, so the naysayer, but actually the optimist outlook is coming more to the fore, I think.
Certainly we're in the echo chamber of positivity, which is actually a nice place to be. So, for a long time, AI has had kind of false starts, going back decades actually. But the truth of it is now we've been building agents here for months, and we now use them in production. They're now part of our product. They now do some of the work internally in our day-to-day that our technology team don't really want to do.
Okay.
So it frees them up, and it's cool. They got to build them, which is a bit of Frankenstein's monster type thing, right?
Yeah.
But then when we went to RSA a couple of weeks ago, and we had private meetings with companies showing us their agents and asking us how should they protect them and how we see the vulnerabilities that may try to attack them. That's where we said, "Whoa, there's more than us!" Right? It was. I felt like we were on a ship for the last few months, looking for land, and then we see another ship, and we're like, "Oh, more people!" And you guys going to land? And then we all are arriving together. And then the next step to kind of make that was just us at RSA experiencing all these, largely private demos.
Yeah.
However, then you see in the last couple of days, the behemoths coming out with their production grade agents.
Yeah.
And so when a company like Google yesterday at I/O showed their I think it's in preview or beta, but it's available to US customers. Their new agent that can do shopping for them, etc. Yeah. And when Microsoft or GitHub under Microsoft launched their Copilot agent a couple of days ago, and it's available today. I have it installed on my laptop right now.
Cool. Yeah. And are you impressed by, obviously you're in this industry in software and in security? Again, let's take software for a long time and AI for quite a while. Are you impressed by what you're seeing?
I'm impressed.
Obviously, accepting that there are first iterations of public agents, let's say.
I'm impressed by the fact that they're at production.
Yeah.
So my expectation of agents are that, and I'm going to use the human analogy here because it's the right one in my opinion. So when we think of software, always it's been versioning, and you think of, version 1, version 1.0. Then we had famously Web 2.0, and then everything, all the software 2.0. But all of the versioning has always been there. If you pick up old video game boxes, they'll have the version number written on the box and etc. It's been around for decades, and it's a bit disappointing actually to see that the major model providers are using versioning for their models. I just I'd prefer a bigger departure. But when I think about agents, I don't think about them as a 1.0 or a beta or an alpha or whatever. I think about them as the development of a person, right? So so you think about an embryo, right? Doesn't do much, right? Yeah. But all the key parts are there to become something. You think about a baby needs a lot of TLC, and really it's not doing anything for you. You're doing a lot for it, right?
Yeah.
But then eventually, over time, it will start, doing things for you. As a dad of 3 kids, the first time your baby can feed themselves, you're like, oh, there's a task I don't have to do anymore. That's great. Then, when nappies go away, it's like, oh, thank God, that's a real disaster. And it just keeps getting better and better and better. And eventually, lo and behold, they're out cutting the grass. Brilliant. Now, they're giving you...
They're taking tasks away from you. Yeah.
And so I feel the same is happening. This is the cutting the grass moment for agents, right? So all these companies have poured loads of resources. They've built models, iterated, made those models better, more capable. And at the same time, at some point in that progress, their teams started beginning to build agents. And certainly there's a whole ecosystem involved. There's agent frameworks, there's tooling, etc., all being built. And many of us have been using agents kind of without knowing it for a while. So Gemini's deep research is effectively a basic web agent, right? Search agent. But
and what's interesting about that is that it's probably predominantly used by people who aren't technology people. I mean, it's a clever. I'm sure that there's reasons why deep research came first and technical reasons, but in terms of a product and a market, you're putting it into the hands of non-technical people, non-specialist people, including myself, and it's really impressive.
So this is the differentiator, right? So that was an agent wrapped with software.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, which is still an agent, and it's still software, but people are using the software. So it's like Google search. They're typing in their search command, and then the agent goes off and does things. It actually tells you, you'll go do something else.
Yes,
I'll notify when you're finished, right? But what we're seeing are the next couple of levels of maturity, and this is why I don't like calling it software. So the agents at this, let's call it, some of these agents are at, let's say, graduate stage now. So they're good enough to work, right?
Yeah.
So, the Copilot coding agent is good enough to do things in a work environment.
Okay.
Would you hand it the keys to your marquee product and say, off you go? No. It's not a principal engineer or a fellow or something like that. Yeah. So, but that's what we're talking about. And that's why I want to reposition the conversation to agents aren't releases of software. They're an expanding set of capabilities and tools, and they're growing and maturing with knowledge, expertise, and capability. And so what we're starting to see now is the very first of those standalone agents that aren't wrapped in software, right? Yes. These agents can exist by themselves. And then they'll keep getting better, but then we jump to, and this is the bit that seems dystopian, but it will be here, if not end of this year, early next year, which is agents have an identity. So much like an employee has access, control, privileges, etc., agents will need the same, and they will be able to roam through your virtual environment. So in security, we call that as a bad thing. It's lateral movement, right?
Yes,
or escalation of privileges.
Which we talked about before,
yeah. So, but we'll start seeing that, and that's a fear factor for agents that if they start, somehow figuring out how to gain permissions they shouldn't have, or accessing services that don't have the right permissions set up. And so it's a whole new ball game when we're used to protecting IT services and systems from humans.
Yes. Yeah.
And sometimes you need physical access, sometimes it's virtual access. Now we have to figure out the same thing for agents.
Okay. And I mean, that's the goes to the heart of what CalypsoAI does. We've talked before, and so obviously the RSA pitch that CalypsoAI made very successfully is that all of the protocols and standards for security are set up for humans.
Yeah.
So what do those standards and protocols look like when we're talking about agents? You know, and actually the funny thing is, in what you just said, we can probably fairly quickly see a day where we're maybe giving names to agents and saying, oh, you know, Bob is working on that, and we're doing X, and Bob is doing Y, and then we're going to, you know, pull together our work or whatever. So when you start talking like that, they have identities and they have whatever. It can be easy to overlook, or you start to overlook the risks. You start to think of them as colleagues and very helpful colleagues and very helpful, and you know, the same way you don't expect the graduate to sort of go off rifling the stationery cupboard or, you know, rifling the boss's desk or whatever.
Yeah.
How do we protect against those? I mean, that's a very open-ended question, but what are the primary things we have to address in terms of changing security standards for agents versus humans?
So understanding the problem is always the first step.
Yeah.
And I want to stress that this should be, instead of thinking about this, how do we protect an agent or wrap an agent in a bubble of security? It's so when you're a human being working in an office, we don't, you know, add some sort of cord to you that you can't go in certain places.
Yeah,
right?
One of those harness things that little kids have.
We don't have someone, you know, watching you at all times. We don't. There's a lot of things we don't do, and why we don't do that, because that would be safer and it's possible. But the reason we don't do it is because it limits and greatly reduces the chance that human will actually be productive.
Yes.
And so this is the biggest balance we have to strike. So right now, all of the effort is on creating the agents to be useful and serve a purpose. And that is the right investment. There's no point in protecting an agent that doesn't do anything.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But now that we're starting to see the agents do things and gain access to things, it's now important to not curtail them or block them or wrap them. It's just like we do in real life, we invest in security. So we hire a security team. We hire security professionals. We need now to invest in security, equivalent of a security professional in agents.
Okay.
And so there's this cross section. If you imagine a graph and one's going up to the right and one's going up to the left, we have this sweet spot that we're now entering into. It's probably 3 to 4 months away, but we can see the early signs of it. So the price of per token has come through the floor. A couple of stats that are really interesting actually from Microsoft, just because I don't want people to think I'm making these things up, right? It's just my opinion. Microsoft, their last earnings call, announced how many tokens they processed in Q1 and of this year. It was 100 trillion tokens.
100 trillion. That's what repeating. 100 trillion.
Yeah, capital T.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's you know, certainly for my brain, it's unfathomable amount of tokens.
Yeah. And
so that betrays the amount of usage, right? It's huge companies. You know, your mom and dad aren't signing up for an Azure account and doing that. Like it's huge amount
of enterprise.
It's enterprise.
Yeah.
And it's a 5x increase year over year.
Wow. Okay.
What's really interesting about that quarter is that 50 trillion of those tokens were in March. So it's a hockey stick on a hockey stick, right?
Yeah.
And the cost per token has halved. So it's a 5x increase with a half cost of token. Okay. And the other really interesting thing, so the usage is going through the roof in AI. The second kind of big point that for this intersection is that there's a whole other development effort going on to build models that are much more sustainable. So those 100 trillion tokens, I don't know what each one was used for, but I would probably argue that only the top 10% of those require the kind of resources that are being thrown at it.
Okay. Yeah. You mean computing resources?
Computing, GPU, power,
yeah.
and all that goes
Yeah.
with that, So one of the big questions is, how do we have enough power for all this stuff, and do we need it, and et cetera. So, but all these companies know that, and what they're doing is, so Microsoft released a model called BitNet.
Okay. And I know you've been, I won't say playing with it, experimenting with it.
With it, yeah. BitNet runs on my laptop. Like lots of models can run on a powerful Mac, but this will run on ARM processors, CPUs, GPUs. So it can run almost anywhere.
Right.
And its quality lags behind, of course, the current best of breed, the top models.
Yeah.
But only by about 9 months.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
So if you imagine those 2 points of quality, and them fast forward a year from now, it wouldn't be a surprise to me if the really low cost to run, really efficient, not bad for the environment models are at the level the current best of class are at.
Wow. Okay.
And let's just take that for a second and take a leap of faith and say that happens. That 90% of use cases I spoke about, let's move all of those to low cost, really easy to run models. And that's the unlock. That's that intersection. When we can have AI at scale without causing material impact to the environment.
Yeah.
Then
and without that enormous cost that we're kind of
enormous cost. Yeah.
Because we're still in that conversation about, we can do all these amazing things, but is it worth it? And, and we see the companies, let's say the pure play AI companies, the model developers, struggling, maybe is a bit unkind, but working to figure out their business model.
Yeah.
Because they know they're onto something. They clearly are onto a huge technological leap, but making the financials work when you've got the compute costs, the energy costs, there was a very eye-catching story a couple of weeks ago about the cost of people just simply saying please and thank you when they enter their query.
Yeah.
And Sam Altman of OpenAI came out and said, maybe lay off the please and thank yous because it's costing us a fortune in processing,
Processing, environment, the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, so BitNet type models resolve a lot of those issues, maybe create other problems for the big model developer business models, but in terms of cost issues and energy issues and the rainforests.
Well, the biggest problem I'm aware of is that my mother always says manners doesn't cost you anything. So now Sam has proven that it does.
It does,
it's
actually.
Very expensive. So maybe manners is going to disappear from the human race. Hopefully not. But I guess so when that intersection happens, what it does is the technology has already unleashed massive potential.
Yeah.
However, bringing that to, if everybody in the world today was to start using each of those agents we spoke about from Google and from Microsoft, just like if everyone in the world tried to take all the cash out of their bank accounts, it wouldn't be enough.
It's like a run on the bank.
It's like a run
on a data center.
A run on a data center, exactly. And so that doesn't exist. Like that's.
So how close are we? You said, obviously a good powerful, Mac or a good powerful laptop. How close are we to running those models on mobile phones?
Very, very close. So they're already running. I have an iPhone, and I'm using whatever the latest version of Siri is that my kids complain about all the time, because every time I ask it for a song, it tells me I couldn't find it. And
oh really? Yeah.
And then anyone using
that's because the songs you're looking for are too old, Jimmy.
Yeah, they're too old. Yeah.
Bruce, who?
They're not. It's not Siri's jam.
Yes, yeah.
But the point is, so like my kids growing up they don't understand AI, but they use it every day. Right. So, and then Alexa Plus that just got launched, every Alexa device in the world, which there are many, all now have this capability. My kids fact check me with Alexa every day now,
really?
Which is super annoying because I'm often wrong.
Yes.
But the world getting full utilization of AI there's some prerequisites. So one of them is that agents are able to do the jobs that they need to do. Secondly, this is a bit dystopian, but it's going to happen really, really soon. The bridge from virtual to physical was coming very, very fast. We already have them in Teslas, etc., where AI is doing work.
Yes, yeah.
But those robotics are coming super fast. So we'll have humanoid robots from Tesla and other companies, that will create these.
See, I'm on your train right until you start talking about humanoid robots, and I
That's
go,
it. But it's
then I become put on my skeptical spectacles, because I'm not convinced. But then I wouldn't have foreseen a lot of what was going to happen in the last 24 months. So
it's
I'm
the
I'm
rate,
not a good predictor of the next 24 months.
This is the thing that's most amazing. The rate of, so people have spoken about AI topping out. So, and that's in relation to the model performance increases. So they're eeping out the kind of the last 10% taking 80% of the time.
Yes,
thing,
and
right?
I laugh, and I've seen several of these headlines lately where company X, huge $1 trillion company X, is struggling with its next release of, and I'm like, these models are amazing. We didn't foresee, as I say, 24, 36 months ago what they could do. And now we're slagging off the people because they're struggling to get the next, as you say, the 10% improvement.
That extra bit of improvement, right? That's not really, of course we want to get better, but that's not really the unlock. So the unlock is efficiency. So making it that if there is no run on the data center, if everyone wants to use it simultaneously, they can. And that work is already well in progress. I am very impressed by Microsoft BitNet model. The second unlock is so we've got the scale, we've got the price coming down. And so if it's running on CPUs instead of GPUs, if it's so much cheaper to run, it will drive the cost per token through the ground. Then it's the ability to operate everywhere. That's where agents come in, whether it's on your laptop, your phone, your desktop, in the server farm, it's doing tasks all the time. And then the last bridge is the physical unlock. So, a lot of us have robot hoovers today. They often have AI built in.
Yes, yeah.
Like, I'm going to avoid that spill. It's too big for the current sponges I have on my thing, whatever. I'm going to go around it and send an alert to the phone to the people saying, hey, you probably need to get a person in here and clean this up. But that's the first stage, and they're designed to be robots.
Yeah.
But the humanoid robots being created are designed, and an interesting piece of research recently was that the reason we're designing humanoid robots, because humans are not the best shape for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like robot hoovers are little circles often, and they work better, and they don't get snagged on things, and they're low profile, so they can go under couches, etc. But the reason we're building humanoid robots is because we've built a world, a physical world that is for humans.
Yes.
So if you want a robot to go do stuff, like even
stairs, door handles and light switches and stairs, and
So that's we're building. So are we building an optimal manifestation of physical automation through AI? Probably not. Are we optimizing for the world we've built that it has to operate in? Probably. And so that won't always work because humans aren't the best, besides Michael Phelps and others at, swimming, etc. Right? But so there'll probably be different shapes for that, and on roads, of course, etc. But we're going to start seeing that physical manifestation, probably in factory floors, etc. first, but then eventually in everyday life. And we're talking a couple of years away. Like I would say, the
I'm
target.
going to hold you to that. I'm going to,
please do,
because I've got a very predictable thing in my head, which is Blade Runner. I'm like, that's where we're headed.
Yeah,
it's going to be raining all the time. It's going to be,
neon signs everywhere.
Yeah. But actually, no, it's early morning, the sun is shining. We're all feeling optimistic. It is actually, I think there has been this shift, and I'm really curious about whether it's just, as I say, within the environment we're in, towards optimism over I've seen tons of interviews of executives being brought in, if we're bringing it back to present day AI, and the interviewer is saying, but what about job losses? What about job losses? There was one just last week, JP Morgan said, we've put AI in the hands, basically, Gen AI in the hands of basically 200,000 employees. And the interviewer said, what about job losses? And said, no, it's a productivity unlock.
Yeah.
And I know they're buzzwords. I know they're, there probably are people who are suffering as a result, but not to anything like the extent that was predicted in terms of replacing jobs. It's actually increasing productivity. And I don't want to sound like I've drunk the Kool-Aid. I'm being realistic about it. But this is, I think it was the chief data officer of JP Morgan saying no, like there have been no direct consequences in terms of employment from giving people AI. It's actually helping. I think she said it's freeing up 1 to 2 hours per week per employee across 200,000 employees.
Oh, it's
So that's
so
so
if you think about what velocity is, right? Velocity is speed and direction.
Yeah.
And so if you are uncertain of the direction, you should not put down the accelerator.
Yes.
Because you're going you're going faster in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So the way I think about agents at scale are that they get to do the variable direction testing like a scout, right? So, hey, I want you to figure out where should I go and at speed. And so if you're a big organization like any major corporation or global corporation, if you have 200,000 employees and you want to have them moving faster, then you really want to be certain of the direction.
Yes. Yeah.
And so those agents give you the ability to look around corners and to try things very cheaply and to empower your employees to get the direction right more often than not.
Yeah.
And so I've been using deep research for quite a while with Google, and my use case is it just fit my life very well. So in the morning when I get up, I give it 2 or 3 topics, get them to search, I go have my shower, back, they're done. Then I get it to create a podcast with Notebook LM.
Yeah.
I jump in the car, I listen to the research.
You're already living in the future.
Well, so what happened? Yeah. What this does for me is, the old version of me used to get my iPad.
Yeah.
Google. Yeah. Eventually get the information I think I needed, probably missing a bunch, probably got some wrong stuff that I had to parse through and go, oh, waste of time there. But then scroll through, and I had a little stylus that I would highlight the key points, and then I would try to remember those key points because they were critical.
And I mean, we're talking about, you're saying what, old you or previous life you. We're talking like 6 months ago.
Way back in 2024.
Yes, yeah. It's crazy.
And so now my workflow has changed dramatically. And that's one person. Yeah. But now, and also my commute I don't consider my commute a waste of time now.
Yeah.
I'm in the car and I'm doing that work that I would have had to do when I get to the office.
And you're absorbing that information.
I can't currently because, the automated driving isn't there yet. I can't sit there and read my tablet in the car. But
and the format actually is better as well. I mean, I think that's the thing that people are, I'm somewhere in the middle ground. Okay. But there's people who are naturally incredibly suspicious of technology.
Yeah.
And if there's any bump, they go, told you it's not worth it. But what you've just described is, and the tools that I've experimented with are so relatively intuitive. Notebook LM is a good example. And, we're not plugging anybody's products or anything like that, but it's a good example of, it's very clear how it works. It's very clear what it can do for you, and a very clever end product, say in a podcast format or whatever. And you go, wow, you're never going to go back to scrolling and highlighting.
But I'd really love, though, Google, if you're listening, I'd love
Google's
some
always listening.
I'd like Irish accents in there, please.
Yes,
I'd love to hear. Let's maybe license. Who will we get? Roy Keane, Tommy Tiernan, a couple of those voices. I'd love to hear them talk.
I'm sure Liam Neeson's probably up for it.
Liam Neeson, although he might find us.
True.
But so that there's all the if we come back to where we are today, so that stuff is very near term future. I know it sounds crazy, but it's not. It really is not. Where we are today, we've got the first production grade mass deployed agents. So it's not is it a thing or is it hype? It's there today. Go to your computer. Go to Copilot, you can download it.
Yeah.
Go or VS Studio, whatever you want to use. Go to Google. If you're in the US, it's limited to US right now. You can use that agent. So the
are we nearly at the, and it's going to kill me if the answer to this is yes, because we've spent a certain amount of time educating people about agents and what they are and all that.
Yeah.
Are we nearly at the point where the word agent is going to be dropped and it's just AI?
So
I use AI for that instead, or people aren't going to, maybe in very specific use cases in enterprise, it's like that's the, niche case agent. But otherwise, for the
kind of
everyday use case, it's just AI.
Well, so I think AI will disappear as a term for sure.
Okay.
Here's where I stand on AI, agent, etc.
So agentic as well is like
agentic,
pulled in, and then people started glaze over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I often split that into, gent, ick, and I use modern terminology, and I think, oh, no one likes male agents, right?
Yeah,
But
Okay.
but
A little
effectively,
insight into Jimmy's brain there.
yeah, that's what I hear.
Yeah,
Words I
yeah,
always break them up.
yeah.
But the first thing I would say is, um, like to actually to be able to secure an agent, you have to think about it very differently than an agent. An agent seems like this kind of I picture like a little robotic thing or a virtual thing. And so agents are, when they start working together, it'll all become very different.
Yeah.
So how I think about it is, in the world today, we have companies filled with humans, and we created a department to look after those humans. And that department is called human resources.
Yes. Yeah.
So, when you think about lots of agents, those agents will have mappings to humans, right? So, how much do they cost, i.e., their compensation, salary, benefits, right? And what access do they need? What's their job spec? What hours do they work, right? And usually in an agent world, it's mapping hours because of cost, not because of like they need to have rest, etc. You don't need
Yeah,
rest, but
yeah.
there's cost association. So there's a mapping from what a human looks like on paper to a human resources person versus an agent.
Yeah.
So the easiest way to think about them are non-human resources.
Yes.
So they're resources
Okay,
that are
yeah,
non-human,
Yeah.
but human resources, non-human
Non-human
resources.
resource. Yeah.
That subtle change makes folks think about it in the right way.
Yes.
So
yeah,
how
yeah.
do we look after them? How do we protect them?
Yeah.
How do we
Have you
secure-
trademarked that, Jimmy? Have you-
trademark non-human
Non-human
resources?
resources.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's going to, I can see it in future annual reports, human resources, and then non-human resources.
But why I say
Yeah,
is
yeah,
I'm pretty
yeah.
sure you're going to on spreadsheets or whatever the future for spreadsheets becomes, you're going to have NHRs, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
who did that task? Oh, it was an NHR. It was an
Yeah.
NHR. It was an NHR. And so, and then there'll be the specific tasks that are mandated or even through law that have to be human tasks,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So this is, if you think about you were talking about job losses, really what's going to happen is there are going to be tasks that are approved for non-HR resources, right?
Yeah.
So these subset of tasks that a human does today will be approved for NHR. And then the criteria for those tasks will be outlaid. And then the protections will be required to be overlaid on top.
Okay.
And that's how we think about them in CalypsoAI.
Yeah.
We think about the use case, the purpose, and it's usually a subset of what a role does today, a human resource does today. So it's a non-human resource subset of things. And then we say, what are the access requirements and what are they allowed, not allowed to do? What do they need to do the job? What tools, etc. And then if we map back to today, the current agents are at like grad level.
Yeah.
So as those agents gain capability, gain tooling and access permissions, they'll go up to like, mid-level, senior, principal, and the NHR requirements for those will go up. They will cost more.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
They will need more security,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the right way, in my opinion, to think about this.
Yeah. And the other thing that strikes me as you say that is humans do their best work when they work together.
Yeah.
And agents, non-human resources, will achieve more and do more and be more productive when they work together. So it's, at the minute we're talking about maybe a standalone agent that does X, but when that interacts with another agent that does Y, another unlock, I'm going to bring you into a tiny little bit of sort of homework here, and homework for me, because I've seen a lot of headlines, is where do things like MCP fit into this? And I mean, I want you to assume I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
Is it, is it something that's, so I had it in my head that MCP is something that's sort of proprietary to Anthropic, and it's kind of their way of doing things. Then obviously we had a step up in a couple of weeks ago with integrations. And just explain to someone who maybe isn't familiar with MCP, is it on the way to becoming part of the infrastructure for how agents interact? Is it a sort of an option over in the corner? What is it essentially?
So it was created by Anthropic.
Okay.
Anthropic are a very thoughtful model creator. And so as a company, Anthropic really put their money where their mouth is in terms of safety, security, etc. Their models are thoughtfully created. They disclose an awful amount of information about the upside and the
Yeah, and
potential
very
downsides.
accessible. I mean,
Very accessible,
I've read a lot of their stuff, and it's, you know, they don't what's the word, they don't sugarcoat it in terms of what you know, if there's a flaw or a potential vulnerability in a model, they put it all out there. They say, yeah, we got it to give us the, you know, the information it shouldn't have given us. And this is how, and these are steps we've taken. It's really very transparent.
Yeah, and to that end, they created the MCP, shared it with the world, so it's open, and they created it, but it's open, and so it's a lot of the other, I guess, competitors of Anthropic embraced it, and that tells you a lot, right? So it tells you two things majorly. One is that they believe it's a good idea, and a good idea not just. I believe not just on security, but also that it will give a higher propensity to adoption, right? So it's a common. So two biggest standards right now in AI are OpenAI's API spec.
Okay.
So they were first with it, and then the industry just adopted it. And there's no takesy backsy rules on that. So it's every tool, etc., uses it. And then Anthropic's MCP is the latest one. And both companies adopted each other's because they are good. And they are an unlock or a catalyst for adoption for everybody else. Because bringing out a competitor to that would actually create confusion. But the way I think about MCP is it's a good start, but it's not the finish. And I don't think it will ever be the final answer. So I think about it in terms of, and I always I try to come up with good examples, but this is terrible, but it's what I've got. So screwdrivers, right? So screwdrivers, everyone was happy with the flathead screwdriver. It was great. You could screw a screw into whatever you were trying to do. And then Phillips came along and went, oh, I don't think we're getting enough torque on the screw here. And it, it slips out and it's not that great. So the Phillips screwdriver came along, and there's Phillips screws. Now, if you go into any DIY store and you buy a screw, there's lots of other derivatives, but they're the two most common ones in non-commercial life. And so the flathead never went away. Yeah. In probably every way.
This is not a route I expected this conversation to go down, but
But in probably every way, it's less good than a Phillips screw. But also, Phillips don't own the rights on the screws. The world has it. Every company can manufacture Phillips screws if they wish. And so that's what MCP is. I think MCP will be the flathead screw for agents. What it's allowing and enabling to happen right now is that folks are building tooling around MCP, so agents that interact with MCP, and enabling MCP servers, which are companies that want their products to be used by agents. They create the MCP server. So it's creating an ecosystem very quickly. However, in my opinion, the reason that at some stage a Phillips screw version will come out is that it limits the upside. It's over-indexing on safety. And so if you set out to build something that's safe, and we talked about this before, like if you set out to build a safe car, it's never going to be the fastest car. Right? If you set out to build the fastest car, it's probably never going to be the safest car. So they're in direct opposition with each other. And so the right thing to do is to create, have two teams, one working on the speed, one working on the safety. And so I feel like the Phillips screw version of MCP will come out at some stage purely focused on optimizing upside. So potential, quality, etc. And then that begets the question, well, who's thinking about the safety? And that's where companies like us and others come in. We're focused on, we don't want to get in the way. Like the famous, well-publicized case of Messi's bodyguard, right? So Messi plays soccer at the highest level, best player to ever exist. Sorry, Ronaldo fans. But he has a famous bodyguard. And that bodyguard runs up and down the pitch alongside Messi out of view. And then if a fan jumps on to the pitch, watch the YouTube videos. He's incredible. And he is so fast, and he gets there before that fan and protects Messi at all stages in his life, going shopping, whatever. And so that's, if you were to say to Messi, don't go near that sideline. The opposition fans are there, right? You're limiting our
Yes. Yeah.
So what you want is you want him to
If
be
you stay in the middle of the pitch, you'll be really safe.
Yeah.
But you won't score any goals.
You won't score any goals,
Yeah,
and you won't be able to unleash your full potential
Yeah.
on the match.
Okay.
And so that's the way to think about agents. We want them to be the best they can be, and they're not worried about security.
Yeah.
The bodyguard is worried about security,
Yeah.
and that bodyguard's job is to let that agent, play soccer, and then they will look after anything that pops up on the danger zone.
Yeah. And that's us. That's CalypsoAI.
That's us.
We're running up and down.
We're
the
non-glamorous. We don't score goals. We're just there when our black t-shirts on the sideline, ready to intervene at a moment's notice. Yeah.
This is sort of, there's a reasonable follow on, but I had this quote written down that I read, and it's probably we could close out on this. And it's a Sam Altman one, predictably enough, in terms of the industry.
I've heard of him.
And I'm sure he's heard of you. And so he says, and I think it was just yesterday, he tweeted or X'd or whatever we're calling it these days. ChatGPT daily active users have increased greater than 4x over the last year. Messages per day by much more than that, so greater than 4x. At the same time, engineering team has greatly increased reliability, now making real progress on speed. Significant scale to be doing this at. Great work! ! Not one word about security or safety. Not one. Like, does that frustrate you?
No, that makes me really happy, honestly. Okay. And so I
mean, that's why CalypsoAI had to come out with security leaderboards, because the companies that are developing these models don't do it.
Yeah, but
they emphasize reliability and speed, and we're sort of almost halfway through 2025, and it's still reliability, speed.
Yeah,
security, safety isn't on their bingo card right now.
So I really believe do one thing well. Okay. The focus I'm delighted that the focus of the major model companies is on making the best models they can make, or the best agents or agentic frameworks, whatever they can make. Because that will unlock, if we want to cure cancer, right? If we want to develop new treatments for many diseases, I want to know that the best technology humans can create is what we're pointing at the problem. Okay. If we're trying to solve global warming, I want to know the best technology humans create is focused on the problem. And so any percentage, even 1% that's taken off that, will just by default reduce the speed or chance of us hitting on that eventuality. And so let those folks do that, and then there's other folks to do everything else. Yeah. So, for example, NVIDIA are constantly creating the best, fastest, most capable technology to run these things. And if we were to say to them, I think we're good. Yeah.
That'll do now. Yeah.
That'd be a disaster, right? So we want them to keep pushing the boundaries. We want everyone to keep pushing the boundaries. And then, but then we also need people like us to push the boundaries on security. Yeah. So we want everyone focused on what their mission is. And then but we do need to have a mission of security and safety and all those things. But I also want the people working on security to be laser focused 100% of the time, 100% of the effort on security. And that's what I feel is starting to happen now. Okay. And it's great. There's so much choice out there from a model perspective. There's so many great vendors. The ability for China to now challenge as well with DeepSeek and Quen, etc., is fantastic. It's treated right now with a little bit of suspicion, and there's a little bit of fear that one may dominate the other. But all I know is it creates competition. Yeah,
it also pushes the security focus and the security agenda. I mean, rightly or wrongly, when DeepSeek was released, and when and Quen, and more recently Quen 3, there is newspaper coverage in American newspapers and American media of how DeepSeek performs. Mm. We never see newspaper coverage of how, on a security level, I mean, and what prompts it allowed and what it allowed to get through. We never see, Claude 3.7 allowed X, whatever. But the Chinese, actually, the geopolitical dynamic actually is pushing the security focus in some ways. I mean, there's kind of it's an indirect sort of positive that
Yeah, it drives if you are able to say with confidence that you're the best at a certain technology, it may create complacency.
Yeah.
But if you have a nagging feeling or a doubt that pops up periodically that you're not the best, it doubles down the confidence and focus on we're going to make ours better. And so that competitive advantage is, if it's in doubt, it's something you really, really try to maintain. And so I feel like it's a good thing to have the competition in there. But also one thing to point out, and this is something we see in the Global 2000, everybody's AI use cases are different, and there are just so many. And it's my favorite part of the job, by the way, is I get to see how people are actually creating, ingenuity in their areas that are just mind blowing. Yeah. And so when I see those use cases, it sometimes strikes me that, wait a sec, every industry is different, every vertical, every company is different, they have their own use cases. But then there's completely different cultures, right? So Mistral recently launched their first model to support right to left languages.
Oh, okay.
And for every part of the earth, there's different needs that are cultural, even very obvious. So some cultural things are difficult to understand, but some are very obvious, like the language being right to left, or symbol-based languages, etc. So I think it is important that that we have competition from different parts of the earth, and the unlocks will be different as well.
Yeah.
So just like when COVID, I think one of the best examples when COVID was rampant, we had a variety of treatments from different companies of different parts of the earth. And famously, some countries signed up to some treatments, some didn't, etc. Yeah. But it meant that the world was focused on this problem. And if we're to solve world scale problems like energy shortages, water, food shortages, green tech, diseases, it requires a global effort. Yeah. So I think it's a net good thing, but it does, to your point, drive the complexity of security even higher. Yeah. And so, I enjoy that challenge rather than want to shy away from it.
Yeah, and in the long run, it's a great challenge, and it's a great net positive. I'm absolutely going to finish out now, but you mentioned the word mission, and I don't know if you know, but the last installment of Mission Impossible is coming out.
I can't wait to see it.
And the bad guy is Rogue AI. I'm sure you're well aware.
Where's the spoiler alert?
Because it's the second part of it's the second part, and the first part's already been out.
Yeah.
And it's called The Entity, and it's Rogue AI. So we've exhausted all the bad guys in the world, and it's Rogue AI. There's only one person, of course, who can save the day, is Ethan Hunt.
Yeah.
So maybe there's some meme potential there for CalypsoAI.
I just want to know what AI Tom Cruise is using to stay so youthful. That's my only question. Yeah.
Well, if you're listening, Tom,
Yeah, I want the Tom Cruise model immediately. Yeah.
No, it seems like a good enough place to wrap up, Jimmy. Thanks a million. Thanks for your time,
Gav.
and your insights. Learned lots as usual, and I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Gav.